Okay, we're kicking off with our this is number 4, correct? This is shiur number 4, and it's appropriate because we're going into Dalet. It'll help people keep track of things. So it should be made clear, as someone pointed out, that our learning should be in the merit of Klal Yisrael, so that we should emerge victorious from the struggle that we're in right now, and should be in the merit of all the hostages, that they should be found immediately and returned home safely. B'ezrat Hashem. So we ended off last week with Os Gimel, and just to give a quick recap of what we said. So Os Gimel was representing the descent into a concrete reality from the sense that consciousness starts to become completely independent, and which is represented by the fact that the consciousness is able to make its own value judgments. As we said, that the Gimel, it represents the idea of Gomel, of the idea of just reward, either punishment or reward for good actions, punishment for negative actions, and reward for bad actions, which is rooted in the ability to make independent value judgments. Someone that can't make value judgments, there's no reward for anything positive they do, and there's no punishment for anything negative that they do. Right? So the three-pronged, let's say, movement, so to speak, of the Gimel, right? Gimel equals 3. It represents the 3 points of the scale, right? The center and the 2 sides of it that are holding, right? They're weighing, so to speak, the different values. So it's this emergence from being attached to the spiritual root and moving into a state of complete independence, which brought about a certain heaviness, right? We talked about that. There's a heaviness to reality. There's a heaviness to independence, and this is the thing that has to be dealt with. So while independence is good, like we want to be independent because it also triggers our own personal growth and allows us to develop our own strengths, right? That's something that Rav Kook emphasized. Right? The other side of that coin, it's a double-edged sword. Independence is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it allows for self-development, but on the other hand, you start to feel the heaviness and weightiness of that independence, right? That you're alone, that you're detached. So this is where we ended off with Os Gimel, that it's bringing in the potentiality for independence, but you have to deal with the consequences of that independence.
Gimel is Gever. Gever. Yeah.
Gimel is Gever?
Person.
Okay, interesting.
I thought that was
where are you going with that?
More independence.
I hear. Okay.
I thought so.
No. It is an essential element. Do you remember that word specifically, Gever, where he talks about that, like Gavra, like the man? We can look back and we can see that. Right. Anyway, so Os Daled. So we'll start with Os Daled. It's very, very short. We'll probably get through this relatively quickly. And as we'll see, Os Daled, there's a close relationship between Daled and Hey. And we'll see that kind of Daled kind of like moves into the Hey. Daled and Hey are probably 2 letters that are most similar from just like a pictorial, structural perspective, right? Daled and Hey. The Hey is literally a Daled with just another aspect to it. So we'll see in a moment. So Hadalet HaSichlit. So the Daled of the intellect. Ptichat HaSagot HaElyonot. It opens up the ability for grasping loftiness. Habilti Mugbelet, which is not confined. Right, we talked about the movement from the world of Bilti Mugbal. The Gimel represents the movement from the infinite to the confined, from Bilti Mugbal to the Mugbal, moving from the infinite to the confined. So the Dalet is actually making, in a way, an opposite movement backward. It's opening itself up back to being able to receive the influence from the infinite. Kishurahi b'chol hamugbal hakitzur, while at the same time it is bound to all that which is limited. Hadalut. Daled means poor. Right? The Gemara in Shabbat has a small section in Perikol Kisvei where it actually goes through the alphabet and gives various brimazim, let's say, on the names of each letter, and on the relationship between Gimel and Daled. It says Gimel Daled Gomel Dalim. That person gives over to those who need, who are poor. Right? So that connects back to the thing that we talked about last time in Gimel, that Gimel is talking about Gemul, just reward, consequences for actions, either punishment for negative actions or reward for positive actions, right? So that reward, that Gomel, is now directed at the Dal, the one who requires it, like the one who experiences the lack. It's actually a good point to harp on for a moment. The Gemara in The Gemara in Sukkah, the Bible in Sukkah on Daf Mem Ches, discusses the ma'alot of Chesed, right? Of Chesed versus tzedakah, and it has an in-depth discussion about this. And it asks, what are the fundamental distinctions between Chesed, kindness, and tzedakah, which we generally call charity? What is the difference between Chesed and tzedakah? So the Gemara says, Chesed you can do with anyone. Anyone can receive Chesed, but tzedakah can only be given to a poor person. So what does that mean? So the Maharal explains in his Chiddushei Agados that Chesed is just the need to be able to give. It's just the giving between two human beings. Whereas tzedakah is addressing a lack. It's addressing an actual lack that exists. So tzedakah, you identify that someone needs something, and you try to fill that the best way you can, right? Like people that exchange gifts in order to show love and affection. You give flowers, something like that. What is person's supposed to do with the flowers? You can't eat them. You can't do anything with them, right? It's just a symbol of affection. That's all it is, right? But tzedakah is addressing like a specific problem. So the gomel dalim is the idea of that it's focusing the capacity to give in a place in order to fulfill the lack. Fill the lack. Ha'aniyut shel hashpa'at hayesh, the poverty that comes about when the yesh comes into the world. This is again harping on the concept that we talked about before, that when the consciousness concretizes, or rather all of creation begins to concretize and become more concrete, more materialistic, so that sense of lack starts to weigh in. Hashpa'at hayesh, when existence starts becoming more concrete, so then that feeling of lack solidifies. Zoti hagoremet sheyuchlu hayitzurim hamugbalim. This is what allows for the creatures that are all confined and limited. B'koach hasagatam liftoach et hadelet v'lalechet michayil el chayil. This is actually the thing that allows them to open the delet, the door, the other connotation of the word dalet, right? Dalet means poor, it also means door. Okay? Liftoach et hadelet v'lalechet michayil el chayil, and to go from strength to strength. There's a point we're going to have to think about. He said, the very fact that there's constriction and limitation, that is the very thing that allows a person to go from level to level, to start beginning to make progress. We have to think about that point, right? It's a very profound point. The existence of limitation is the thing that is the paradigm in which it allows the person to be able to grow and to make progress on self-improvement, self-development, etc. And there's this two connotations. I'm remembering now something I read many years ago from the Bnei Yissaschar. So he talks about the classic liturgy in the sleep, meaning it's the person that recognizes that there's a state of lack. So that creates the door on which to knock on. That's the idea, right? The dal, he now becomes aware of the delet, that he now sees that this is where I need to walk through, right? And as we're going to see, that right, the lack, right, it focuses someone's perspective. It focuses someone's vision in order to be able to know where to go, where to proceed. Another blunt way of saying this is pain is information, right? Pain is information. It's telling you where to go. Yeah. Hadalati gamkein miromemet. So the opposite connotation of the word dalit is also true, meaning dal means poor, but it also has the exact opposite connotation of to uplift. Where do we see that? Aramimcha Hashem ki dilisani, because you've lifted me up. Right? Milashon dalo dala, right? That someone draws water from a well, that it's called lidlot, to uplift. So it literally means one thing and its opposite. Dal is someone who's poor, and dala means to uplift. Okay? Hadalati gamkein miromemet v'sho'evet et lishad ha'chaim, and draws forth the lishad. That's a hard word to translate. Lishad is like the rich, like the rich liquid of life. Mimayanot hatahom, from the depths. Dalo dala, right? Like the term to draw up from the well. That word lashad is the word that's used. We saw that a few weeks back in Parshas Beshalach. It describes the taste of the mun, right? V'ta'amoke lashad hashemen, right? It tastes like the dripping honey. It's like this bread that was like oozing forth with some sweet liquid. Anyway, al yidei hamon harishamim hagashmim bimkoman, through all of the sensory experiences of physicality in their place, and through all constriction in general. Right. So this is the experience when someone puts out their sensory perceptions and experiences with all of their senses, all of the rishamim, all of their senses experience constriction. So it actually triggers the ability to ascend. I should really just putting the phone on airplane mode. We won't have any disruptions. Hadalati b'shnei kavim. The dalet is formed by two straight lines. It's actually a very simple letter, relatively speaking. We have the aleph, which is pretty complicated. The beis, I guess, is pretty simple, but at least it has more than two lines. So the dalet is literally just two lines at a right angle. In fact, lahalacha, even if you were to draw just two lines, right, one horizontal and then one vertical, it would be a kosher dalet. The only thing that separates a dalet and a reish, lahalacha, is the back corner. The top right corner of the dalet needs to be squared, whereas the reish is rounded. And even if it doesn't have the little piece that goes back on the right hand side, that protrudes to the right, even that it's kosher. It only needs to be squared. That's the only thing that requires of a dalet. So it's like a very simple letter. Very interesting. It's like a measuring stick that's measuring across and measuring down, which represents the measurements of quality and quantity of the constricted world, of this created world. Ha'echut zeu tochen ha'elyon. Just to give a quick recap, he's revisited this concept of quality versus quantity in different contexts. We talked about last week about how it's how the gimel represents gay mal, that the speech descends to the depths. And he says, why is that? The speech has been thrown down to the depths because it's an attempt to fill in the lack of quality with more and more quantity. And when someone senses that they can't quite describe the thing in their mind, so they're very verbose and they just talk and talk and talk in an attempt to fill the quality that's lacking with more and more quantity. Yeah. So here he's saying, interestingly, that the dalet it is measuring both quality and quantity, but it's now beginning to measure quality and quantity in the context of the constricted world. Before that, once you've exited the world of the infinite and you've gone now down into the world of constriction, so it's as if there is no more quality, because the quality has been completely lost, right? The shift from infinite to constricted, it's like, why is there to talk about? There's no more quality. The dalet is already beginning, okay, well, we're here, this is where we are now, so let's try to get some quality also where we are now. Interesting shift in perspective, okay?
Geographical connotation as well, longitude, latitude.
Right. I guess that's what he's saying. I don't know which one represents which. I mean, it means that the vertical line is measuring the quality, right? Because there could be lower and higher, meaning worse and better, yeah. Whereas the horizontal is measuring the amount. Either something could be wide, like big, or constricted and small. Ha'echut zeu tochen ha'elyon ha'yesodi ha'me'ubeh. The echut, the quality, is the content, the lofty content, which is fundamental and forms the basis of hameubeh, that's been made thick. So we'll go back to that term. We'll go back to that term in a little bit. The idea of something being made thick, it means that it's made concrete, meaning it's limited to only a particular thing. It's not floating around in the air. It's no longer theoretical. It's been made concrete. Hachazak b'mitziuto. It's now strong in its own independent existence. Asher katseu hayemani, the right hand side of the letter, koach ha'ez shabo ha'mehaveh u'mechayeh, represents the strong, forceful will within the thing that gives it the ability to thrive. Interesting. Okay, we'll get back to that. Mecholel b'chelo et hakamut hamitrabeh, which contains within it the chayil, the valor, of the quantity that begins to increase. So he's talking about now the relationship between the quality and the quantity. It's basically saying that the yearning for authentic quality actually puts forth the quantity to increase. So this is an interesting point. when we talked about an Os Gimel, we said that there's a negative relationship between quality and quantity. We said when quality is lacking, so there's an attempt to fill the lack. Right? What's the word I'm looking for? Supplement. There's this need to supplement the quality with more and more quantity, which never works. Which means that the gay mal, right? The speech has been thrown into the depths. You're just attempting to speak and speak and speak in a desperate attempt to describe the experience, and you can't because the quality is just so bad. Right? The quality of your words are so bad, so you can't actually hone in on the quality of the experience. That's one possibility. But then there's the other reality in which that, no, if you can make something with more quantity that can give expression to an authentic quality, which really, if you think about it, is the dynamic of all the parshios that we're learning now vis-a-vis the Mishkan. And the idea of the Mishkan is that you have a measured building, right? It's a physical structure, but it contains infinite quality, right? Which is, right, that's the speech of Shlomo HaMelech we see in Perek Ches of Sefer Melachim. He opens up. Here, I feel we really need to read from this quickly. Hold on.
Just on it.
Where's the Tanakh when you need one? Where? Thank you. So in Sefer Melachim, when Shlomo is giving his inaugural speech, which is actually very, very long, it's like 60 verses, which is it's long. I mean, there are chapters in Tanakh that are like a third of that length. So he says in Perek Ches, Az Amar Shlomo, Hashem Amar Lishkon Barafel. You God, you spoke that you dwell within the cloud. Right? We see that God first appears to the Jewish people in a cloud on Sinai. He appears in the Choshech Hanon Barafel. Okay, Bano Banisi Beis Zvulach, and I have now built a house for you to dwell in, Machon L'Shivtecha Olamim, which is meant to be a permanent dwelling for you forever. V'halo ha'eretz v'hashamayim lo yichal kaluka. I've made this house for you. How are you supposed to fit in it, so to speak? Behold, the heavens and the earth cannot contain you. Meaning, if all of the material existence cannot contain you, how is this small little house supposed to contain you? So, like, he kicks off the speech with this realization that there's this schism, there's this constant schism going on between quality and quantity. But he says, nonetheless, meaning it's an open question. He doesn't actually answer that question. He doesn't say, well, the way that it works is it? No, he doesn't say that. He's just an open question. And he says, like, living in this paradox is actually possible. It's possible that there could be a built house which has certain parameters, and that quantity can be the basis for infinite quality. So after there's like the fracture, right, the fall, so to speak, the fall that we talked about in the Gimel, the realization that there's this high quality and you're desperately trying to give expression to it with these constrained tools, and you're trying to supplement the quality with more and more quantity, right, that moves into the realization, okay, we'll do the best we can, and we'll build a house, we'll build a confined structure, and that will be the basis for infinite quality. So that's like, it's moving into this possibility. It's like someone saying, like, I'll give a hard example, not related to the Beis HaMikdash, which unfortunately right now is not relevant, right? Someone who has a family, so the family needs a house, right? So what's the difference between a house and a home? A home is, right, it's a social interaction, right? A home means that there's a relationship going on. That's what it means. But a house is the material substrate for that home. So you kind of need a house for the home to be normal. So you could say, well, how much quality is there in your family? So hopefully there's infinite quality in your family, right? The quality is infinite. The meaning and significance it's infinite. But the house is not infinite. The house is it's however small or big it is, right? It's right. Is it right? It is what It is what it is. But that confined, constricted house can actually be the basis for infinite quality. And that's the realization that's coming, right? That's starting to come in with the Daled, that it literally looks like a measuring stick. Right, it looks like, right, the measuring across and the measuring there. It's like we're going to give parameters to this now. Where were we? Excuse me, I lost the place. I just read that. Mash'irhu hakav hakamuti, right, the line that is measuring quantity. Et hayud milacharav, it has a small protrusion on the right side. Right, as you said a second ago, the dalet on the top right has a small protrusion on the back. Hayasod hamispari, hakoach hamarbeh, which is alluding to the power of more and more quantity. Omed hu menatzeach al hatochen hakamuti, which is representing that it is overpowering the power of the quantity. mitoch hachayil shel hatochen ha'echuti, from the strength that it receives from the power of the quality. Interesting. Okay, so he's saying that what gives the person the motivation to create something in quantity? It's the yearning for quality. The yearning for quality is the thing that's pushing someone to create more and more quantity. How is that being alluded to in the in the top right protrusion of the Daled? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's alluding to how that's being alluded to in that specific part of the letter.
Sort of implied it's almost like a little yud at the end, and the yud we said before was.
Et hayud melacharav hayesod hamispari.
Yud is always quantity.
That's correct, but he also said that the horizontal line, meaning the top line of the Daled, is the thing representing the quantity.
Amudu. Amudu, is that not column? It's always referring to the line going down.
The protrusion.
That's what we're up.
Sorry?
I didn't hear the person talking.
Yeah, say it again. We didn't hear you. Yeah.
Amud who? It's referring to the line.
Amud is referring to the vertical line.
The column.
Where does it say Amud? It says Omed. Omedhu umenatseach.
Okay.
I think it just means it's like Omed means representing. I don't know if it means Omed like Amud. Interesting. Okay, so we'll see if we can get an explanation for that. Why is it that the right side protrusion of the Daled represents this specific point? Fine. Hakav hada.
Maybe that protrusion is a portal from above, so to speak.
Okay. Interesting. Possible. Hakav hadak hu hatochen hamemuat. This small kav, right? This small line. This is referring to the vertical line. Hu hatochen hamemuat hakamut haholech v'nimshach mishifat ha'echut. That is protruding out from the influence of the quality. Shahayesod hamispari ha'echuti, that the foundation of the numbered quality notain bo l'shat hachayim b'koach hayit rabut. Okay, so that was the point that we didn't understand correctly. Right, it's the opposite of what I said. The line, the vertical line in his construct here is actually representing the quantity. The vertical line is representing quality. Excuse me. The vertical line is representing quantity, kamut, whereas the horizontal line, the top line, is representing quality. Now it makes sense. So the quality line, right, overtakes the quantity line. That's the protrusion to the right-hand side. So that's what it's symbolizing. I assumed that it was that the vertical line was representing quality, but it's the opposite. The vertical line is representing quantity, the kamut, and the horizontal line is representing quality, the echut. Tov. I'm going to read the little summary down over here because I feel like it's going to give us a little bit of insight. It's on the same line. He has a section called Havraka. So Hadalet Hamuskelet, the phenomenon of Dalet in the intellect, Hu Hamugbal is the power of constrainedness. Hapoteach Shar, that opens up the gate, Lamashahu Lamala, that which is above. Hadalut Shel HaHakara, the poverty of the recognition, Goremes es hablita shel ha'yitzurim, it causes all creatures to take note, B'hidolev shoevet mimayanot ha'elyonim, and thereby they are able to draw from the well springs of the above. Kaveh hadalit, the lines of the Daled, meaning the horizontal line which represents quality and the vertical line which represents quantity, roshmim et hakamut et ha'echut, hayud shel hadalit sheme'acharav, the small yud, which is correct, Nava, what you said, that he's referring to that small top right protrusion. He's referring to that as a yud. Hayud shel hadalit sheme'acharav more al hakoach ha'echuti. It is showing how the power of the quality, hamechayeh et hakamutiyut, which gives life to the quantity. Again, what that means is that the yearning to experience quality is what gives the person the impetus to create more and more quantity. In order so that the quantity can be the substrate for the quality that he experiences. Of course, that can be distorted, right? The person can think that the more quantity I have, the more quality I'll experience, which is not true. You do need a minimum amount of quantity to have to the experience of quality, but it's not that the more quantity you have, the more quality you'll experience.
The base is
Huh?
quality. The base is quality. The foundation is.
The foundation is quality? No, I think he's saying that the foundation is made by quantity, or it could be that that we mean different things when we say foundation.
Maybe just different words.
It's like in the mashal that we said before that the house forms the basis for the home. So it's like the material substrate that allows the home, which is the quality, to exist.
But the home was what you had in mind.
Correct.
Built up.
You're saying it's the foundation in the sense that it's the impetus for everything. It's the thing that motivates. Right. It's the motivator. It's the motivator. Correct. Okay. So we'll read some sections over here from the commentary. The first idea that he talked about was that the Daled becomes it's both the recognition of poverty, which creates the opening for inspiration. That's literally what he said. It's the dal, poverty, which then becomes the dala, the uplifting. So it's the constriction that triggers the upliftingness. Ha'od daled mitkasheret lemila delet. It is related grammatically to the word door. V'kam medubar al delet lahasig sichlit. Right. This is the door opening up to understanding. So that intellectual understanding has two aspects to it. From one perspective, it can be a door to a world, to a place where the grasping is infinite, to which a person is able to grow and develop more and more and more. So it's like the opening to the infinite, meaning like infinite possibilities. You see that there are just endless possibilities for your personal growth. That's one, right? That's one aspect of it, which is what Rav Kook means by the line "Hadelet hasichlit p'tichat hasagot elionot." It becomes the opening to lofty understandings. Habiltim mugbalot. Me'edach, on the other hand, haseichel hu olam dal. The intellect has an aspect of poverty to it. Hadalut shel ha'akara, which is what Rav Kook refers to as the poverty of recognition. V'hu kashur li'olam hamugbal v'hadal shel hayesh, which is the recognition of the constriction and the poverty of existence itself. Hamugbal hakatsuv, as Rav Kook says, it's the constriction of that which is finite. Hadalut, poverty, ha'aniyut, shel hashpa'at hayesh v'metziut hamugbelat, which is created by existence itself. Right. So it's like the more you know, the more anxiety you have, the more you notice you're familiar with, you're aware of all the constrictions and all the challenges that exist in the world. To the extent that you're aware, you have more and more constriction. But at the same time, all that constriction is really showing you a doorway to where you can grow and develop. So that's the dal, right? The poverty, which forms the delet, which forms the door. Hadelet kshura imkein gam ledalya mitoamot elyonim, which is why the daled, the os daled, the letter, also alludes to the dala, the uplifting from the lofty depths. It's almost like an oxymoron, the lofty depths. It's interesting how both in English and in Hebrew, when we talk about how something has profundity, so you can either say that the thing is deep, or you can say that the thing is high. Both are correct. It's very interesting. And you say something like it's very, very deep, very amok, and you can say something is very lofty, like elyon. Both in Hebrew and in English, both those idioms exist. It's very interesting. Yeah. Mishpatecha tehom rabba, right? We say in the pasuk in Tehillim, right? Your judgments, O God, are infinitely deep. Right? It doesn't mean deep like low, like lowly. It means deep like, right? Exactly. Yeah. Which is in and of itself where this is coming from. It's like the thing is both deep and high at the same time. It's very interesting.
Also matches the physical universe. You can go really, really, really small, and there's tons of complexity. You can go really, really, really big into the universe and the galaxy. And there's tons of complexity.
Right. It's like the fractal, right? The fractal relationship between the macro and the micro. Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Yes. Like if you what's the thing that if you hone in on the cell? No, if you hone in on, what's the thing that if you hone in on it, it looks like the Milky Way? What's the?
I don't know. That's good.
Yeah, I believe that. I'm trying to remember what it was. It's an important molecule in biochemistry. if you hone in on it, it looks like a picture of the Milky Way. I'm forgetting what it is. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to say stam. Shmuel, you look it up for us. Shmuel is intrigued. Shmuel likes these mishalim. Where were we?
Can't you say Delilah diminished Shimshon? The diminishment of the greatness of Shimshon?
Delilah, right. Yeah, that's good. What was the other? Is there another name? I'm trying to think of another name. Dalo, Daliti. Tov. Right, that was the line we just said. That the Dalet alludes to this idea of drawing forth from the supernal worlds. There's a very powerful connection between these three connotations of the dalut, the poverty, dalia, drawing, and delet, door. Poverty, drawing, and door. Three words that seemingly have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but they're all literally the same word. Ki chavayat dalut, the experience of poverty, sheyesh ba hakara sichlit, which is an experience of the intellect. The intellect, the more you know, the more constriction you're aware of. Goremet, that causes la'adam lishof u'lichaleitz mimadim tsarim. It causes it, right? It triggers the yearning to find a way out of that constriction, to find the door out of the constriction. The thing that's coming to mind now, I'm sorry to use this mundane parable, but it's that scene from Willy Wonka where they go into the hallway, and right, the further they go down, the smaller it gets because it's an optical illusion. They think it's very wide, but the more they go down the hallway, the more and more narrow it gets, and at the end of the hallway is a door that leads to the infinite expanse, so to speak. So it's like the poverty, the constriction, is actually leading you towards the door to get out of the constriction. Or as Churchill would say, I'm bringing an English muscle just for you. As Churchill would say, the only way out is through. Yeah, that's right. So it's like It's like the constriction. Right. It's literally leading you to the door. Right. The dalut is leading you to the door. Beautiful. So Makor Kabbali. This is just an interesting note, right? We've talked about, in past shiurim that Rav Kook was heavily influenced by the Pardes Rimonim in Sharch of Zion that talks about all the letters, and this letter is no exception. He just brings a quick quote from the Ramak over here that I'll read. He says, "Al pi hazorah Shechina nikreis delet." One of the words for the Shechina is delet. Ve'nikre ken kishi dala b'miskenut. It's called that because of the connotation of poverty, that the Shekhinah is very poor. As the Zohar says in Parashas Yisro, right, that the Shekhinah is alluded to the moon because it doesn't have its own light, les be migar me klum. It doesn't have anything of its own accord. It's always, right, it needs to receive in order to shine forth. But at the same time, it can be the substrate for all content. Yeah. So the next concept that Rav Kook talked about, was the experience of anava, the experience of humility that comes from the dalut, that comes from the poverty. Anava v'yitrokenut. So ha'anava shemitkasheret b'derech klal l'sfirat hamalchut. So in general, the experience of humility is tied to the sphera of malchus. Malchus is the bottom sphera in the spherotic structure, usually associated with the domain of application. Right, when a whole process is finished, the intellectual planning has been done. Right, that's at the top of the chain, and then you go through all the emotional and action-oriented attributes, and then application is the final step. Chavayat ha'anava, the experience of humility, kolelet et hayecholet litrokein mimitziutcha ishit, requires that a person empty themselves from their own experience of self, which allows a space for other shefa and other blessing to come in. Which is why the dalut is also a prerequisite for the building up, meaning that feeling of poverty that you yourself are lacking, that you need to be helped and filled by other things, is actually a prerequisite to be able to do anything. Malchut, of application. Anything that requires application, first there's a need for recognition that you are lacking and you need assistance from the outside for other people to fill you. So the ability to have anava, to have that humility, to open yourself up to other possibilities, is the thing that's being alluded to. This is I think another layer on the relationship between the dalut, the poverty, that opens up the delet. Right? It's on the one hand. There's also, you see, there's the constriction itself, which is like leading you to the door. Right? You're feeling very tight and confined, so it's leading you to the door. Like this is the way that you need to go in order to get out. And then there's also the recognition of self, that you yourself are lacking and need help from the outside. So in these two ways, the dalut, the poverty, leads to the delet, leads to the door.
But the anava is like before the dalut, or no?
No, I think the anava is caused by the dalut, meaning when there's an experience of poverty, meaning that you experience yourself as lacking, so you understand that there's space for other people. The Maharal in the Sivas Olam gives, I think, the best, most profound definition for anava. He says anava means that you are profoundly aware that other people exist. That's what it means. He says, to the extent that you are aware of others' existence, that is your anava, which is why the Gemara in Megillah says famously, right, Kol makom shatara gedulas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all places that you see God's greatness, Shama Tara an masanuso, there you see His humility. God is the most humble. He's the most humble. Why is He the most humble? Because God, there's no one more profoundly aware of the existence of all other things than God, because all of reality is contained within Him. He generated all being into existence. So God is the most aware of everything else. Right? So therefore, by definition, He's the most humble. Right? So anava means that you're aware of the existence of the other. So there's hitrokanut, there's an emptying out of the sense of self, of the this definitiveness of self, that you are all that exists. Right? You're all just like characters in my show. Right? But when you're able to empty yourself out from that, that is dalut. There's like a feeling of poverty that comes with that, right? It hurts. It hurts to realize that you need to, take other people into consideration and stop thinking about yourself so much. So there is a sense of poverty there, but that actually opens up the possibility for the delet opening up to the infinite expanse. Yafeh. Very, very nice. So just a word or two about the last point that Rav Kook talked about, the two lines. Again, to clarify, because there was some, I'm sorry I confused everyone to begin with. The two lines, one is horizontal, one is vertical. The vertical line is representing the vertical line is representing the quantity. Yes, the vertical line is representing quantity, and the horizontal, I'm just testing everyone, and the and the horizontal line is representing the quality. Yeah, okay? Hadal b'nuyim mishum kavim. Now, kav ha'elyon mu'uzan, the kav ha'tachton mu'unach. Right, one is vertical and one is horizontal. Okay, ha'echut. He's quoting from Rav Kook. Ha'echut zetochen ha'elyon ha'yisodi ha'me'ubeh. So the quality is the lofty content that has been made thick in the context of it's been made concretized in this material world. Zu ha'siba shekav zeh hu kav aveh yoter v'hu me'ubeh. Very interesting. So when the Daled is written, and Rav Kook likes honing in on this, that there's thin lines and thick lines in writing the letters of Ashuris. There's sometimes the lines are thick, sometimes the lines are thin. We talked about this in Os Beis, that the two parallel lines that go horizontal are thick, and the line that connects them on the right hand side is thin. So he talked about the significance of that. So similarly over here in the Daled, the horizontal line on top is thick, whereas the line on the right-hand side, which is going vertical, is thinner. So he says, what is this alluding to? It's alluding to the thickening of the domain of quality. That quality now needs to have some type of physical substrate in which it can exist, because there's a realization that in order to experience any quality, there needs to be a quantitative substrate to contain it. The home needs a house, to harp on our previous mashal, which I think is a good mashal. So Rav David adds an interesting idea just on the idea of the progression of the letters. We talked about in our first conversation that all the letters, they're not like standalone concepts. They are standalone concepts, but at the same time there's also a progression. So Aleph leads into Beis, into Gimel, into Dalet, etc. So now he's just giving a note over here about the significance of Dalet in terms of the progression from all the other letters. So he says that in the Kabbalistic let's say construct, so the Aleph miatzeget et ha-chokhmah ve'et ha-keter. The Aleph represents the highest levels of the intellectual sphere, which is either Chokhmah or the Keter, Chokhmah being the flash of inspiration in which you see the entire structure filled already, right? Or Keter, which is the domain of will, which exists even before Chokhmah. Okay, the Beis represents et habina. The bina is the intellect experiencing the particularized world, right? Chachma and bina. Chachma is the totality of the thing, and bina is the specificities of the thing, right? Or in another way of saying it, it's the right brain and the left brain. The right brain experiences the world in wholes, and the left brain experiences the world in parts. And you need both of those things in order to have any possibility of interacting in the world, because you need both of those things simultaneously. Yeah. So the bina is represented by the bays. And if you remember, the pasuk that we quoted from Mishlei already alludes to this idea, right? It says, "A'alefcha bina, I will teach you understanding. A'alefcha, I will aleph you." Right? If you could turn aleph into a verb, right? It's A'alefcha, I will teach you. I will aleph you. Bina is is also the verb form of the letter beis. Yeah? So I will aleph you and beis you. So I will give you the totality of the picture, and then I will teach you how to take it step by step and be able to. And it's actually relevant to this week's parsha. The first time that we see Chachma, Bina, and Das, the three triads of the mind, is in this week's parsha. That God gives B'tzalel Chachma, Tvuna, and Das. Yeah, these are the three qualities that are needed in order to construct the Mishkan. Right? God downloads these qualities into his mind. So, as Rashi says, Chachma mashma kabel mirabo. Chachma is what you receive from the teacher, and it comes from outside of you. And then Bina is malamed davar mitoch davar, that you're able to extrapolate from the teaching of the master. You're able to extrapolate that into things in your own experience. So it's literally receiving the entire picture from someone who already has the whole picture, and then you apply that in a case by case basis. It's literally the holistic versus the particularized. Yeah. So that's the aleph and bina. Gimel miatzeget et midat hamishpat. As we talked about last time, Gimel is all about mishpat, it's all about judgment, because judgment is a function of independence, or you could see really the opposite, that judgment is the thing that creates independence, right? Mishpat is the balance which is the intermediary elements of the spheros, they're all about balance. Chesed, which is all giving, Gevura, which is all retreating and discipline, and Tiferes, which is a balance between the two. So Gimel represents all those intermediary elements, okay? And the Dalet is the Malchus, the last element, which is the domain of application. So there you go. Aleph is Chachma, Bina is Beis is Bina, Gimel is all the intermediary elements, and Dalet is the last element.
Dat through Yesod. Dat through Yesod.
Dalet is Gimel is through Yesod. Correct. All of the things that are taking place from Chesed through Yesod, the fundamental pattern which is going on is a balancing act. It's balancing, right? There's Chesed and Gvura, which are then balanced by Tiferes. There's Netzach and Hod, which are then balanced by Yesod. Right? So those six things, even though each one is distinct for sure, in the end of the day, they're all part of this mini. I'm not sure what to call it. It's like a miniature play within the broader pattern that started from Chachma and ends with Malchus, right? It's all a balancing act. So that's why Gimel, which, as we explained, represents balance, represents mishpat, it represents the scales weighing two things against each other and finding a harmony and a balance between them. That is all representing the intermediary elements. So we finished Daled, and next time, as Hashem, we'll start Hey. Yishar Koach.
In the name of Rabbi Abraham himself.